And here we go. Hello, and welcome to another Nomad Community Office Hours. Today we have Nick and Seth joining us. Nick, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah. Hi, folks. I've been on one of these before. I'm an engineer on the Nomad team. I've been working on Nomad at HashiCorp for I don't know, a little over 2 years now. So a little bit of experience. So yeah, I'm excited to hear from you folks, and yeah, I guess I'll kick it over to Seth to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Seth. I've been on the Nomad team for just over a year now. I work with Nick a lot on network key things in Nomad. I guess we're excited to answer some questions for y'all.
Thank you. So we're going to be trying something new with our office hours going forward, and we're going to be trying to do more focused office hours. So today's the first iteration of that, where we're going to be focusing on Nomad networking. So highly encourage any questions you have like that. As I just put in the chat, we actually don't have pre-submitted questions yet. So if you have one ready to go, shoot it in chat, and we'll be ready to just kind of start talking. Before we get to that, just also a reminder that HashiConf is coming up. What day is it? It's the 30th. So it's coming up in like 2 weeks. We have a lot of Nomad talks lined up, and I'm really excited to hear about them. So if you're not registered yet, you probably want to go register. We have a lot of really big announcements coming up, especially if you've seen any of like Mitchell's tweets about the not one, but 2 surprise products that we're launching. So yeah, lots going on. I guess before we get into that, how are you two feeling about HashiConf coming up?
Well, I'm excited that we can finally
Yeah, it's
talk
always
about these
fun
mystery
to do,
products.
I know, right?
It's always fun to do these digital. I feel like we get a lot more people involved, and you know, it's a whole different sort of ball game.
Yeah, I'm pretty like, well, actually, I'll just ask you first. Is there any talks in particular you're looking forward to that are slated? If I'm putting you on the spot, and you haven't had a chance to look, that's totally okay.
Well, I know a member of our team, Tim, is going to be doing a Nomad talk that we put a lot of preparation to, and I'm really excited for. The keynotes are always fun. Those are always a must watch.
That makes sense. So yeah, our first question that I got was if we could do some CSI related questions or just network questions. Um, so mostly we're doing like the network themed kind of session so that we have 2 of our network developers on, and that's what they focus on. So they could give you a more in-depth answer, I guess. But it really depends on how you 2 feel.
We can definitely try to answer CSI questions. Truth be told, Nick and I are not the domain experts in that area, but I mean, I'm sure we've looked at the code here and there, understand some of the concepts.
That makes sense. We had, I don't know if we can do this during office hours, but we had a question that was, I'd like to see a written example of how to use Nomad with flannel or calico. I can't speak today. With flannel or calico. I understand that there is CNI support, but I'm a bit lost. Do we have any like resources or something we could point them towards for that?
So we don't yet, and that's definitely something on the shorter list of items we want to improve for documentation. I can say we are working with a couple customers of ours who are working on deploying custom CNI and Calico stuff. So we're taking feedback from them as well, and kind of incorporating that all into what will hopefully be some great documentation and guides on how to get started with that.
Nick, if I wanted to set up like a really simple, just kind of toy CNI setup, like what do you think would be a good way to do that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you can run CNI plugins with the dev agent as well. You just have to use, there's 2 dev flags. There's nomad agent -dev and -dev-connect, and all that does is it just enables a couple more features that are a couple more settings that aren't enabled in dev mode to get you some of the networking bits and make sure that we're running the client and root and things like that. But if you do that and you can point Nomad to your CNI configuration and CNI plugins as well, that's like the bare minimum Nomad side. And then what might be a good resource is actually just taking some of the examples from the official community CNI plugins, things like the Bridge plugin, Mac VLAN, things like that. Each plugin of those has examples, and you can take one of those and just start playing with the different plugins, the different things that are available. Chaining plugins as well. So there's like an official port mapping plugin that Nomad generates the correct arguments for, and that's how port forwarding works in the new Nomad group-based networking. So you can kind of just play with those and get a sense of how the pieces fit together, maybe before jumping into how do I take something like Calico, which is a CNI plugin, but also has some third-party dependencies. Like I know Calico needs a data store. I think etcd and the Kubernetes APIs are the only two that it supports. So there's some additional setup with those, and that's what we want to document and get sort of well written out. But just getting started, I think those community plugins are a good place to start.
So touching on getting started, I know Seth and I were recently pairing on one of the demos that I was working on, and I thought it was really cool to kind of talk through some of those basic levels when I was learning. So I figured maybe we could start there because it'll actually relate to one of the questions we got into. When you're first starting a Nomad cluster, what are some of the basics you need to know about networking and how it works in Nomad?
Oh man, there's so many things to know. But if you're just starting out, I think it's important to just have an understanding of what you're trying to do. If you can't draw a picture in your mind, at least, of like what is going to connect to what on what ports, you kind of need to stop and think that through first. We do provide some examples. So for example, if you're using Console Connect or whatever, which is kind of like the future of networking, if you want to call it that, we have like examples that kind of demonstrate the bare minimum making this Console Connect connection work. And if you start from something that works and build up to what you actually want, I think you're going to have a much easier time than if you just try to like actually read the documentation line by line and then try to write this massive job file with like the end product first. I think you're going to have a lot of hard times debugging that rather than like incrementally adding on to something that you know works. And when something doesn't work, you know it was the last thing you tried to add, right? Yeah.
So we've gotten two kind of questions related to this. One of the questions was about what is the best way to structure a job, like a LAMP stack that needs to have a web, a Redis, a SQL, and a Postgres.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So you have a few different options there. You know, and I think it depends on how you've organized your infrastructure, your applications. You know, one way to do this is you can have a single job file, and within that job file have a task group for your you know, application server, one for Redis, a task group for Redis, a task group for your database stuff as well. And all that is in one job file, and it's kind of in one easy place to manage. That's maybe great if you're the only person working on it, or maybe there's one or two, very small group of people. Kind of once you get a little bit bigger, it sort of usually makes sense to break those up into multiple jobs, so you're not worrying about clashing or you know, over stepping on toes when you're making those sorts of changes. So you might have a job file that encapsulates your application server, and then one for Redis, and etc. So there's not really, I mean, that's sort of the, I mean, maybe a blessing and a curse of Nomad is that things like that aren't super opinionated because the technology should be flexible enough to fit your infrastructure, not the other way around. So I would say if you're just starting out, everything in a job file is really easy. You have all the context right there. It's really easy to sort of just get going and playing. And then as things kind of get more complicated, you can peel one thing out into a separate job file and kind of move from there.
So another follow-up question I got about our previous answer with networking. Now I've scrolled and I'm trying to find it. It was from Tracy, and it was, so basically I would need to do a bare minimum diagram before I just start connecting things.
I mean, I can only say that it really helps to have a mental model of what you're trying to do before you try to do it. I think one of the more common networking GitHub type issues that we receive is, I try to set up a bunch of stuff and it doesn't work, please help. And there's just no, like, a lot of times there's not even like job files submitted with it. So it's kind of clear that the person doesn't have a clear picture of what they're trying to do. And when you're doing networking, that's the most important thing you can have, right? It's how you understand the model of what you're doing. And that includes like the security model. Like, are you using host networking or bridge networking, or like what has access to like the thing that you're trying to run? All those questions, I think, kind of really need to be answered before you actually try to run something.
Yeah, to build on what I said before about sort of starting with everything in a job and breaking things up, I think the same is true with networking. Sometimes the best thing is not to, if you're just getting into using Nomad or any of its features, Connect probably isn't the first thing you should go and set up and test that feature out. It's really something you want to kind of build on. It's a building block you kind of want to work up to, I think that'll set you up for success if you sort of add feature by feature on, whether that be Connect or Vault or deployments or things like that.
I think Charlie already took a stab at this answer, and I'm pretty sure it's right, but we'll just kind of ask anyway. Hey, the question is, hey, can we access the Nomad UI if it's running on EC2?
Yeah, I mean, it really, again, it depends on sort of what you've got set up here. If everything is with a private IP and there's no public-facing endpoint to your Nomad cluster, which is probably the most secure way to initially set things up, then you'll need something to either like a SSH proxy, or you could also set up a separate Nginx or some sort of web proxy that is exposed publicly on that same private subnet, and then you can lock down that access point, with a username and password or things like that. From there, you can also look into, running the Nomad servers with TLS enabled, which is always a good practice. Nomad has a way of doing mutual TLS authentication. So if that TLS web API endpoint was exposed publicly, Nomad could require that there was a client TLS certificate as well to be able to access that. And you have to do that gets complicated because the server does, or the browser doesn't natively let you give it a client certificate to talk to the endpoint. So there are some extra steps there, but there are more advanced ways to sort of set this up if you don't want to go the SSH port forwarding or web proxy method.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm trying to check off the questions we asked and just scrolling through that because I missed one up here. So another question we got was, they're asking about if they're using Docker to deploy their services, how would Nomad fit into that?
Well,
if you take that one.
Yeah, if you're just right now using Docker in place of something like systemd, where you just have statically provisioned jobs, Nomad can help with that. First of all, Nomad has a built-in Docker tasks driver. So everything, well, not everything, but most things that you could configure with Docker, you can configure through Nomad, making use of our Docker task driver. But as far as like, if you're thinking about sticking with statically provisioned applications, or if you're thinking about moving into the future where you have a cluster, like a heterogeneous cluster of machines where your applications run anywhere, like Nomad can really help with that, right? So you can set up Nomad with constraints to keep your applications on individual specific machines. But if you're using Nomad, why not move yourself into the future a little bit?
So I have a two-part question coming up next. The first part is the current default networking is bridge. Is this recommended for production?
Yeah, I can take that real fast. Yeah, this is fine to use in production. We have many users using it in some fashion in production, and in some ways, it's not that much different than Docker's default bridge networking mode. We're just doing a couple tricks to allow that to allow multiple tasks to join that same network namespace.
And the second part of it was that they would expect that to have overhead in terms of the performance, and what can we expect on that front right now?
Yeah, in terms of overhead, I mean, every networking feature you have is going to have some sort of small overhead. Now, with the bridge networking, like I said, since it's very similar to how Docker's bridge networking works, you're not going to see any difference there. The only thing that I can think of is maybe with port forwarding, when you do like a port mapping. Most users are never going to see any sort of a performance difference there. Now, if you start talking about much more higher performance networking, real time aspects of maybe video or audio streaming, things like that, port mapping and maintaining a NAT binding like that can sometimes have just naturally have some performance characteristics that aren't good for those more higher performance scenarios. But for the overwhelmingly majority of individuals, there's no performance overhead that is gonna limit your application.
So another question that we got that I'm just going to address quickly is, it would be great to understand when to use Nomad and when to use Kubernetes. So what I've been told I can share with you is that we can tell you that our HashiConf Nomad keynote is going to go into this, and you'll be able to hear the full story behind that and some of the decisions that were made, and basically a lot of comparisons. And the conference is free, and it'll be in October, so we'll have a lot more information coming out about that, because it is a very popular question that we get, and yeah, there'll be more information. I don't know if either of you have anything you'd like to add on.
Yeah, I think we actually have some reference material to look at on hashicorp.com about Nomad versus Kubernetes, if you want to look into that.
Good catch. I remember reading those, and I always forget to reference them when I'm actually here. So I'm actually really interested in this one. We got, after reading through the service docs, the service stanza is going to be moving to group instead of task, and I was confused about that. Can we elaborate on the motivation for this?
Yeah.
Sure, I can take that one.
Yeah,
Actually.
why don't you take that, Seth?
So a lot of this moving service from task into group is about the fact that a console service is intended to represent not just a single like running Linux process, but rather potentially a group of services, dare I say a pod. Yeah. So, and then the Nomad equivalent to that is, of course, task groups, where you have more than one task working together to serve the group. And so having the service definition at the group level just makes it fit the mental model better. That isn't to say task services are going to be removed at any point in the future, as far as I know. It's just that there's going to be new features added in that only exist at the group level service definition.
Yeah, just to reiterate too, you know, the service stanza inside of a task is not going away. You know, there's still some use there. You know, you can not use any of the new fancy networking features and just have a single task running, and that serves plenty of people really well. And so that part of it's not going away. What we did deprecate and want to remove is network resources being defined on a per task level, just because you can define ports at the group level, and before you could define ports at a task level and still reference those in any other task as well. So just sort of like moves of resources that was defined on a task but referenced across task to a group. That just seemed like the natural way to reference those things. Plus, it cleans up a lot of code. There was a lot of you know, sometimes edge case written code that had to check of if one thing was defined in one place and not defined in another. So it helps for stability as well. But services and tasks are not going away.
There we go. Sorry, I was like hardware muted because I didn't want to drink water and broadcast that to the world, because please no. Let's see. I think you probably covered this already in that last question, but just in case, the next question we had is, when is it a good idea to put it in the task section versus in the group section?
If you've got a group, maybe with only one task, then it doesn't really matter. Or if you really do want to have your console service definition point directly at an individual task, like represent an individual task, then sure, it makes sense to continue doing that.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that is only specific to task services is if there is a feature where the address that a service uses to register into console is derived from the driver. So the common example of this is if you use the Docker's network plugins, so separate from Nomad's bridge networking mode, like Docker has its own set of networking plugins. So if you're utilizing those, you can have a task-defined service that is using the address from that network plugin to advertise to console. That's the only key like feature-wise that I would do that. You know, some of it's personal preference. Me, I like having all of the services sort of near the top before I define all my tasks. So you open a job file, and near the top you can see exactly what service or services this job or this task group is responsible for.
Yeah, to expand on that, like I almost envision services as the interface into the task group, and just having like the interface defined at the top. You know, just kind of lines up with what you might write in code. I like that.
We are actually almost at the end of the questions that we've got so far in chat. So that worked really well. So I'm just going to let everybody know that's watching, if you have more questions, we have more time. And what else do we have here? This one's not as networking focused, and I'm personally interested, but yeah. So what we got asked is, are we going to be looking at a Nomad container CLI for pipelines at some point that we know of? If we don't know, that is okay, and we can ask after.
Seth, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, I guess maybe some clarification on what's meant by a container CLI for pipelines. I can think of a few different meanings for that, and I'm just not 100% sure what the individual's asking.
That's okay. I think this might be one of
So
those questions is that it's like really good for GitHub issues so we can get a little more information and have some kind of asynchronous back and forth discussion. So
yeah, discuss is great as well.
oh yeah, discuss too. Yeah, either of those would be great for questions like this where we want to kind of discuss it and figure it out. Maybe we don't know if it's on the roadmap yet. Maybe we don't know exactly how you want to use it. Those are both good places for us to be able to get eyes on it and discuss it. Discuss, but yeah.
Yeah, we have
Um,
product managers who are always very eager to hear about new and interesting ways people want to use Nomad or new features that people want to see.
So I think we have a lull in networking questions. So I'm going to ask the question I'm actually surprised hasn't come up yet. Uh-oh, that sounded dramatic. But so coming from Kubernetes background, I should just go back and edit Kubernetes out. Anyway, oh, I did again. I know one of the things you get kind of right away is a direction in how to set up Ingress. It's very opinionated there. In a Nomad world, how would we want to go about setting up Ingress?
Yeah, so this is kind of Nomad's blessing and curse in that it's extremely flexible and doesn't dictate a particular way to do ingress. At the moment, I think there's two very popular methods, which is either traffic or Fabio. Fabio in particular has like great integration with console service catalog, and automatically sets everything up for you, and yada yada yada. Now that Console Connect, I think, is being pushed a lot more, we're getting questions around how do I do ingress into a Console Connect world in Nomad? And that is something we don't really have a great answer for at the moment. Nomad 0.12.5, I think, introduced Console Connect ingress gateways. But Connect ingress gateways are actually kind of targeted for the east-west use case, which is, you have an old mainframe that can't be modified and you want to be able to access your service mesh services from that mainframe or whatever. You'd use like a Connect ingress gateway for that. But it's not really intended for the north-south use case, which is like public ingress from the greater internet. For that, I think you're still kind of in this model where you need to set up something like Traffic or Fabio or Nginx or something, and then plumb that in with an actual Envoy sidecar directly in your Nomad job file. So you'd have to like configure the backend for the gateway, and then you'd have Envoy forwarding traffic from gateway into the console service mesh. Yep. I don't know, Nick, if you had more to add.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the service mesh field here is something that's always changing and exciting, but what it makes it hard to use tools that we've done traditionally, like Traffic and Fabio, and use them in this service mesh world where everything's, for Connect, we've got mutual TLS and everything, and this great intentions API in console. One of the things I have seen though, I think I've seen a few issues in like the Traffic repo about how to do console connect natively in Traffic. And I think that's getting a little bit of traction. So my advice would be, if there's a particular tool, be it Traffic or Fabio or something else, that you're really interested in seeing support for console connect, you might either thumbs up an issue that's already open there, or try and open an issue there, and we're happy to sort of do what we can on our side to make sure anything, any hooks or other pieces are available in Nomad for those sorts of things.
Yeah, like you mentioned Traffic, there was recently a large code drop that enables setting custom transport objects per service backend, I think, which is a huge step towards making it work with Connect Native. That's actually really exciting to watch.
Yeah.
I was just typing in chat. I just in our chat, I just drank my water and accidentally inhaled it. So that's what was just happening with me over here. Of course I did that live. Why would I not? So recovering, but another question that we got was, is bridge networking required for Console Connect? Because when I use bridge networking, I can't use a metadata proxy. Is there a way to get the metadata proxy to work with bridge networking? So this is a two-part question.
So for the first half, at the moment, if you're using sidecar proxies for Connect, then yes, bridge networking is required. And the reason for that is so that it's not possible for outside processes to snoop in on the connection that would otherwise be hidden by the bridge network. So when your process is running and serving something and Envoy connects to it, like that's not happening over any kind of secure connection. It's just plain TCP or HTTP. Like if we didn't have bridge networking, that would be exposed to any other process on the same box. There is, however, Connect Native. So instead of using a sidecar proxy, you use this library from the console team to actually, like, instead of an HTTP client or HTTP.server, you actually use like this server or client from console libraries. And then you don't need to use a sidecar proxy. Well, if you do that, then there's no need to use bridge networking. And so, yes, you can use host networking with Connect Native tasks.
Just scrolling. I keep squinting because also my prescription is out of date. Unfortunate. But all right, I see you with this question. Is it possible that one of the two HashiCorp, the new products, will be even better than Fabio, Traffic, and Nginx at this? And what I can tell you is stay tuned because we have so much information coming up at HashiConf. I can't say any of it right now because I think a lot of people would be very upset with me if I even gave you a hint. But yeah, stay tuned. There is two of them. Yeah, we've been watching it behind the scenes and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, who likes those brand colors that Mitchell has teased? They're pretty awesome.
I am very excited about them. Like, this is a little off topic, so I'll be fast. But I was planning on making like colored mocktails based on each of the products, and I was just like, oh, redacted red. It's just got such a good ring to it. Like, oh man, we have been getting a lot of pipeline questions today, and I'm trying to see what ones fit well because I think I've skipped over a couple of them here. Pipeline and CSI actually.
Sounds like maybe we should have a pipelines or CSI themed office hours next.
That would be good. That would be good. I will jot
Yeah,
it
your
down for
folks
a
are
future one.
very excited about task dependencies and how they can use and maybe abuse those for their pipelines.
So another CSI question. Oh, I think Tim actually just put a thread into it. Oh, there, it was answered in chat actually by Charlie already. So pretty well, and he actually linked a learn guide to it, but I can't even see where that is in chat anymore. So I can't reference where it was. Let's see. I'm just reading through. I think
Maybe while we're looking for questions, folks on the chat, if there's like one feature that you could add to Nomad that you feel like that's the one feature that it's missing that would just make everything chef kiss perfect, what is it and why?
this delights me. I feel like that's like reverse office hours. It's like, hello, listeners. I'm like looking at chat like, when
now
do they
that I've
see it?
gathered you here. But yeah. it's interesting. It's hard too because a lot of us on the Nomad team come from infrastructure operator backgrounds, and me personally, this is the first full-time software engineering role I've gotten to be in, and it's been fun. But you do get a little disconnected from being in that operator role day to day. So it's always really great and personally really exciting for me to hear what people love and also what they don't love and want to see better.
Yeah, they just follow up. Like my average cluster size these days is 1. Just have Nomad running as both client and server and do all the work on that. It's definitely different than running like full production clusters. You lose a lot of just kind of the insight on what people are actually struggling with whenever you're just working on the product itself.
That's true. And when you're always like working on new features, it's really hard to get a feeling for how people are deploying it at scale or handling things like version upgrades. Um, yeah, I was like, oh, I'm about to tangent, so I should stop. So we got another question regarding Connect and Bridge networks. It says, so Bridge is needed outside traffic to the Nomad group, but the traffic from Nomad group to legacy app will still be possible, like app both talking to Envoy and via Bridge to some other application.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. So I think we're that question to me is sort of mixing two things together. There's the bridge networking mode, and there's console connect when you start talking about Envoy. So yeah, you can have an application that is talking out of your either out of your service mesh or out of the bridge network itself. Um, that all works just fine. It gets natted to the host's IP address, and so anything that host can talk to, if it's a legacy app somewhere else, you should be able to talk to it from inside your application, and then talking into it the verse way, and that's where the port stanza and the new to field where you can do a port mapping from that host IP and port into a port inside of your bridged network namespace allocation. And then when you throw console connect in there, that's when you start talking about that Ingress gateway feature where we sort of take those primitives of doing port mapping into a network namespace and toss on some Envoy and console magic to allow you to bring that traffic from a legacy app into your service mesh.
And just to kind of follow up, the reverse will be possible soon too. So Ingress gateways allow like non-service mesh to connect to service mesh. Terminating gateways, which will be added in the future, it's on our roadmap, will enable service mesh applications to connect to non-service mesh applications kind of seamlessly.
I am just quickly collecting some of the answers we got from Nick's question so I can share that to you. That's why I'm like super focused, type. But yeah, some of the answers we got back about what we'd like to see in Nomad were around making TLS setup easier to use. Maybe something new like DNS or Let's Encrypt integration. Another answer was that they'd like to see us do some more work with the CSI integration and having stateful sets. I think I missed a couple, and there's a comment about Levant as well. So, I mean, I'd love to see Levant personally, but I guess I kind of want to not pick on, that's really negative. Discuss a little bit about the TLS setup. Is there any tips you have about making it easier to do?
So, and I've been doing some other stuff um, that I will reveal soon, hand wavy. But I've been having to use TLS a lot for it in Nomad. And one thing that's made it easier for me is, Terraform has some great primitives to manage TLS, and I don't have it set up with Vault or anything like that. So there are tools out there, but it's unfortunate that sort of Nomad puts that onus onto the operator. I think there's a lot of I think console recently too has a, maybe it's not even recent, it's probably been there for a while now, has some auto TLS features that sort of in some scenarios lets you get TLS for free or for really cheap effort. And so some of those things I would love to see us bring into Nomad. And even if it's not the most secure mutually authenticated with a PKI system in place, just a starting point where like clients and servers are talking to each other over a a TLS socket would be a nice step in the direction that we can sort of build on and make better. And maybe one day we can just tell Nomad to go fetch some certs from Vault, and it will wire up all of the TLS for free. But yeah, there's definitely a gap there that we see and want to address.
Okay. So another question we got was agent-dev behaves differently than a single node server and client. Could those differences be ironed out?
The answer is probably not. They're different on purpose, I want to say. Whenever you're running in dev mode, Nomad does a handful of things automatically just for convenience. When you're running in dev mode, for example, and I suspect this is what you're getting at, it will automatically clean up tasks for you whenever it shuts down. In contrast, when you're running without the dev mode, it will leave tasks as they are, which is deliberate, because in the production use case, you probably don't want your tasks to stop if the Nomad process stops. I mean, there's a few other differences, but I suspect that's what you're getting at.
So teammate Taylor wants to know if there are any Easter eggs in the Nomad UI or CLI. And I think teammate Tracy gave a great answer, which was, if we told you, they wouldn't be Easter eggs. So I just wanted to shout that out. But yeah, moving along. What was the next question? I'm checking them off, but so next question was, is there a way to use AWS metadata proxy with bridge networking?
Yeah, I think we need to. I've seen that raised a little bit on another Slack channel that I'm part of the community, and I think we need to do some. I'm not sure what the limitations are there. I've never set up metadata proxy. As my understanding of it is, it's a thing that lets you sort of proxy things to AWS's metadata API and kind of scope IAM roles to specific containers and whatnot. So from what I've heard, no, it's not, but I'm not sure why, and I haven't had a chance to look into it yet. And I think it has to do with the Nomad API doesn't know the IP address of the allocation inside the network namespace, so where that request is originating from, the IP address. And for that, I recently did a PR to sort of expose an allocation's network status, as you will, as part of the allocation API, which lets the client sort of send the IP address of that allocation up to the server. In terms of how Nomad's architected, there's data sort of usually flows in one direction from servers to clients. There's very little data that flows back from a client to a server, and that sort of helps make it easier for us to make sense and resolve state. But I did add the ability for a client to be able to report back to a server what an allocation's IP addresses, and that's available in the allocation API. So I guess my answer is no, but maybe someday, as we we look more into metadata proxy and what the actual problem is there.
There we go. Okay, so the next question is kind of fun. It's about setting up, if you're provisioning your infrastructure on-prem, how would you provision it? So they're asking if we'd want to do something like starting with Nomad, or if we would want to start with console and what would come first. I have thoughts, but I would like to hear yours first.
The good old HashiStack chicken and the egg problem. Yeah, this is an interesting and not really a hard question. Just there's several different ways, and I don't really have an opinion of what the right way is. I mean, the nice thing is that Nomad can just auto find itself if there's console already running. So if console's been set up before Nomad, setting up a Nomad cluster is really easy. But then at the same time, Nomad can use, if you're running on a cloud provider, well, I guess you were talking about provisioned here. So that's sort of the one nice thing about having console first is you sort of get auto discovery of all of the pieces for free. There's an argument to be made about running console on Nomad, and there are pros and cons to that. So all of this rambling to say, I don't really know. I would love to hear your thoughts, Seth.
No, I'm pretty biased. Just like at my previous job, we started with console first, right? It was just there before anything else. So in my mind, console is just like the base layer, and then everything else kind of builds on top of that. So I install console, then Vault, then Nomad, then whatever else.
So in that scenario, then, because the only argument I've seen made is, well, Nomad's sort of the lowest layer of your data center. It's like the kernel for your data center, if you will, in terms of scheduling. Is console and Vault the only sort of infrastructure-y things you have to set up outside of Nomad, and then everything else can just be deployed as a system job or a service on another infrastructure service on Nomad? Because there's like an interesting case to be made about, well, we could just deploy console on Nomad or Vault on Nomad and then use all of our operation knowledge of Nomad to manage those tools on that. So I'm curious to hear your experience there.
Yeah, no, we never did anything like that. We just had really, we had Puppet layout, a whole bunch of stuff, and then we had Mesos on top of that. Console and Vault being two of the things that were just part of the control plane, I guess. The layer that was managed manually. Anytime you had to update or do anything else, it's all extremely manual.
I love the answers coming in chat. Somebody said Vault. James just chimed in with Vault plus console, then Nomad, and then console specific for jobs for him. Somebody else tagged me as like, your thoughts, and I'm like, whoa, okay. I'm just kidding. I said I had thoughts.
Yeah,
so.
Jackie, what are your thoughts?
I mean, part of it I think really depends on where you are. So I come from a healthcare background where we were doing some legacy infrastructure and some Kubernetes infrastructure. And what I think you might find, and we also had greenfield apps for the most part that I worked on. And I think what you find is there's a lot of focus on deploying these features out and getting your pods or your jobs out. As soon as you get to crunch time, you're like, we need security, and it ends up kind of getting squished in, and it can be really hard to do properly at that point. So I think if you have a more security-based thing where you need to split out, your front end can't be talking directly to your database, and you have to make sure that this network can't just go through. My thoughts would be that you should definitely be deploying both upfront and allowing access as required. And I know, just kind of, it's hard. It's a lot easier with console, especially in tensions. That was like I had a moment of like, wow, I wish I knew this a year ago. Actually, that was console and Nomad. I was like, I wish I knew these both a year ago because I had these really specific pieces, like having a distributed testing cluster that also included Windows machines. That was just incredibly hard to try and do with Kubernetes. And I didn't mean to go into the Kubernetes versus Nomad question. That's just my background. So kind of those things and being able to make sure you restricted it. And I don't know, I ran into problems with like colliding subnets after we'd already created because we're doing VPC peering across different environments and different products. So it's a lot harder to fix those problems down the road if you don't kind of think of them up front. And this comes back to actually both of your answers about, drawing out your networking and understanding which connections are going in, which connections are coming out. I said that backwards. It's okay. And like knowing what should be connecting to each one, it's easier to start doing that and kind of add onto it iteratively than it is to say, okay, we've now got our application almost ready for production, but now we need to secure the different pieces of it. And now it's going to be a lot harder because there's moving parts. You need to manage, upgrading. This is again my background, but like upgrading the deployments and making sure that all the database migrations run in the same order, but you're not messing up all the connections, et cetera, et cetera. It's just easier to build in and kind of keep doing it as you go. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah,
Cool.
opinions.
Yeah, I think that just highlights, the big old it depends answer. Like, if you're in a background like with healthcare where you have to worry about PHI, like
Yeah.
most companies don't have to worry about that. Then you have to look at things through a different lens, and that affects your decisions. So, love it.
Yeah, like my background previous to that, where we were working with like tabletop streaming devices, had totally different requirements on security. So it's kind of, it depends on what you need and what you need, what the risks are of not doing the thing you need. In a PHI case, that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars possibly per breach, per person, per information. I think
Mhm.
actually somebody's gonna quote me at some point and be like, "You were wrong," but whatever. I'm sorry. It's been a while. But yeah, just be aware of your risks and if now I'm preaching, but if you're on that spot where you're like your managers are like you need to get this out the door, make sure that you are like pushing back if you have these risks and you need to get them in, and try to kind of build that early in because again it's so much harder to catch up. I feel like I could do like a rant on this, so I'm gonna stop now.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for letting me get on my soapbox. So the next question we got was, this is not related to the network, but is it possible to make Nomad plan output machine friendly, like JSON?
Yeah. So the Nomad plan from the CLI perspective, I don't know actually. I don't know if there's a JSON flag or not, but the Nomad plan, like the CLI tool, just uses Nomad's JSON API. So there is a job plan endpoint. I believe it's just pulling up the docs right now. Um, yeah, so there's a create job plan endpoint. If you go to the Nomad project API docs under the jobs section, there's a create job plan where you specify, the um, the job, and you get back a plan output in JSON. It'll show you all those diffs, and I've actually never worked with that API directly. I know our like the Nomad UI has a really I love the output of the plan diff in the Nomad UI, and that uses that same JSON output. So um, yes, it is available. I don't know or think that like the CLI tool has a command to do that, but you should be able to hit the API to get that.
Yeah, I was just trying it right now. I don't think it works. There's no JSON.
And teammate Michael, I don't know why I started prefacing everybody with teammate, but if they are, but like I guess it's clarity. In the YouTube chat said that the plan endpoint is a little bit weird though, because you have to first use the parse endpoint to convert the HCL to JSON. So just adding that in.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because the API is all JSON. There's not really an HCL part of the API other than that parse endpoint. So that's a good note to make. You need to have a Nomad job in a JSON format to submit to the plan API.
So our next question, I'm chewing over it because I haven't actually used DigitalOcean yet, and I think I just lost my DevOps card. But the next question we have is, I just started using Nomad, and I'm wondering how to set up a VPC network in DigitalOcean droplets using remote execution because the private IPs are only allocated once the droplets are created.
Yeah, so the yeah, I guess I'm not 100% sure how that affects. Well, I know there is a DigitalOcean discovery. So like the thing that Nomad uses in its retry join section of the config, which kind of stipulates how to find other nodes in the cluster. By default, it has like a console default. If you don't have console, then you can sort of use another method of, there's a Go library under the HashiCorp GitHub org called Go Discover. And there are different ways you can discover other machines, ones through AWS tags on instances. And I believe there's a DigitalOcean variation of that as well. I think you just have to make sure, as far as the private IP, I don't think that should be a problem in terms of setting up Nomad. In your configuration, you can use, it's in our documentation, there's some special ways you can say, I want you to bind to the private IP of the instance. There's another Go library called Go Socket Adder that sort of does that. And I think those two things combined should let you run things. I haven't set up Nomad on DigitalOcean, so I'm just sort of rambling a bit about some of the different features that might help there.
Yeah,
if
and
there's
again,
an
this
issue,
sorry, this might be a good question for discuss, because like there are other people out there who are actually probably doing exactly this, who can answer much better than we can. And we use AWS for all of our E2B testing and all that stuff. We don't really have DigitalOcean domain knowledge.
And I would say if you're having a really bad time with it, like it's just not working, then discuss, or that might be a bug, and just open an issue. And we'll do our best to look at that.
And I think the last question we have time for is, do we have an update on the timing of the Airflow integration? The answer I've been given is that it is on our roadmap, so it's still coming up. I just don't have an exact timeline that I can share with you for it. If either of you have more detailed information, please share, but if not, that's okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think either of us work on that part of the Nomad stack, but
That's fair.
The bird in our ear is our product manager, and he says it's on the roadmap, so it is on the roadmap.
This is not a question, but this I relate. It's weird how much of our jobs are about translating stuff between YAML, HCL, and JSON. Yes. Yes.
Isn't HCL like a superset of JSON, technically?
I'm sorry, I was still just laughing. That's all. All right. And I think so at this point we've got 2 minutes left. So, I mean, first off, thank you both of you for coming on. And I think having the focus topic went really well this time. There's been a lot of people. Chat's been really active. Also, thank you, chat. I think this has been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you both for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, just another shout out to all the folks in chat. I mean, this office hours wouldn't be exciting or fun if it weren't for you folks. So please, it would just be me, Seth, and Jackie talking about stuff, which is fun, but I feel like I'm digging myself a hole here now.
No, it's okay, +1.
I appreciate you all coming and taking the time out of your day to listen to us ramble and answer questions.
I would just be doing my awkward anxiety wiggle where I'm like, are these the questions you want to hear? I'm so sorry. So thank you, really thank you for coming in and asking all these questions and being engaged with us.
Yeah, hard save.
I guess like let us know what theme you'd want to see for the next office hours. Seems like CSI and maybe Airflow have a lot of traction. So
Yeah, or pipelines. Definitely either put that on Discuss or at me on Twitter, DevOps Jackie. I swear I actually look at every single notification I get, even though sometimes they take a while to get to it. Or you can add us at HashiCorp. It'll just be easier for me to focus. Like sort is the word I want if it's at me because I'll see it directly. But looks like CSI. And yeah, I guess so. Just final words are, HashiConf is coming up. Registration is open. It's free, and I can't say too much, but I can say that Nomad has some very exciting things coming up in addition to the 2 brand new products. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing everybody there. And again, just thank you so much for joining today. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the community before I hang up?
no, thank you all. It's been fun.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
everyone.
community.
Sorry, Nick. I'm bouncy and excited now. So, anyway, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you at HashiConf, hopefully.